Gil, hi. Thank you for joining us.
Pleasure, Sarah.
Thank you. Good. I want to let everybody know that you are the chief political correspondent and analyst for the Jerusalem Post. You've interviewed every major figure across the Israeli political spectrum, and you've been interviewed by top media on 6 continents, and you're a regular analyst on CNN, Al Jazeera, and other news outlets. You're called the most optimistic man in Israel. That's actually quite a distinction, Gil, by Israel Television, and your writings and TV appearances provide a behind-the-scenes look at the intrigue and humor into the Israeli political arena. As Adam already said, you were raised in Chicago. You graduated from Northwestern School of Journalism and wrote for the Miami Herald and Arizona Republic before making Aliyah. You were a reserve soldier in the IDF spokesperson unit, lectured in 10 countries and 46 states here in the United States, and you now live in Jerusalem with your family. And you're on.
Thank you very much, Sarah. It's a pleasure being with your group and speaking to the supporters all over the United States. Thank you for making the time here I'm going through to try to find a quieter place. Thank you for making the time to be with me today and get an update about what's going on in Netanyahu's efforts to form a government. So, today, Netanyahu met with Shas leader Aryeh Deri in order to try to get another party done. He finished 2 of them yesterday. Moshe Kachlin's Kulanu Party and United Torah Judaism. Netanyahu failed to get Aryeh Deri to make the compromises necessary. Aryeh Deri is still insisting on receiving a 3rd portfolio in addition to the economy portfolio that he's going to receive that Naftali Bennett had in the outgoing government, and the religious affairs portfolio. He wants another one, either the welfare portfolio or the Negev and Galilee development portfolio that Silvan Shalom has right now. Netanyahu said no. He said, I have Likud ministers. I need to give them jobs too. I need to have 12 portfolios for the Likud. So Netanyahu stood up to him. Deri also refused to compromise toward the Bayit Yehudi and give them a deputy inside the religious affairs ministry. He said, nothing, no, I'm controlling all of it. And so right now, there can't be a deal with Shas, there can't be a deal with Bayit Yehudi, and Yisrael Beitenu is also making demands, not portfolio demands. They ministry, even though they have 6 seats, they should be very happy, as well as the absorption portfolio. But they also want to have ideological demands. The diplomatic platform of Yisrael Beitenu that calls for exchanges of territory and populations for Arab towns in pre-67 Israel being given over to a Palestinian state while keeping more land in Judea and Samaria. Lieberman wants the government's platform to call for toppling Hamas. Netanyahu would like to topple Hamas in the ideal world, but he had an opportunity, he didn't do it last summer. And so I don't think he wants that to be part of the platform either. And so all 3 of these parties are causing problems that make it not be able to get done. And time is running out. The deadline is this coming Wednesday at 8 p.m. By law, if Netanyahu doesn't have 61 MKs in hand to present to President Reuven Rivlin by then, by law, Rivlin has to either appoint another member of Knesset to form a government or to initiate election, which is the last thing anyone wants. Now, so that's where we stand right now. I'd like to think, though, over the weekend, Deri and Bennett and Lieberman at Shabbat, they'll chill out a bit, maybe finally make some compromises that will allow this whole annoying process to get done by that deadline on Wednesday. There is this loophole that Netanyahu only has to say that by then he has the government in hand. He doesn't have to actually present it until the following week, and then he could deal with the Likud after that. It's going to be very hard for Netanyahu to deal with his Likud members of Knesset because so many of them want to be ministers, and so many of them are going to be disappointed, some of whom really deserve portfolios, who've been serving Netanyahu very well, been strong allies of him, advocated for him. They're not going to get it. There's not enough portfolios to go around for all of them. I'm sure that these members of Knesset who want to be ministers are pressuring you to pressure Netanyahu, and maybe that will have an impact. You never know. But That's going to be the hardest part of this whole thing, and probably the most interesting and exciting part. Once that is all done, as Adam was saying before, we've got a government to start working on the country's problems. And I think that this 67 MK coalition that's being built will finally be a stable one. After the coalition of the outgoing government was so unstable, it was a coalition that Netanyahu didn't want, that Naftali Bennett and Yair Lapid really forced on him. This time, it's going to be a lot better, which is very good for the political reporters who've worked pretty darn hard. I'll give you some reasons why it's going to be more stable. So first of all, the finance minister is happy. That's very important, that the finance minister be happy, especially in a government whose goals are mostly socioeconomic. You know, no one serious, I guess, other than Europeans, think that there's going to be a peace process. So the focus is going to be on bridging the gap between rich and poor and fighting the monopolies that have made the cost of living go up so high, on solving the housing crisis. And so for that, Moshe Kachlon got what he wanted from Netanyahu in the negotiations. We saw that governments are more stable when you have a finance minister who's happy from past governments. I mean, Netanyahu was the finance minister of Ariel Sharon, didn't even want to leave the government when they were withdrawing from Gaza. Because he was accomplishing so much as finance minister. So that's a key to stability. The ultra-Orthodox being part of the government, Netanyahu always wanted them to be a part of the government because they create stability, because their demands, I know that the Yediot Achronot and anti-Netanyahu media are making it look like they asked for the sun, moon, and stars. They really aren't asking for all that much, just money for their institutions. Netanyahu has no problem giving it out in order to get another 13 hands that vote in favor of whatever he wants to pass. They are relatively trouble-free. Another thing that Netanyahu has done is he snuck into the coalition agreement a clause that says that if a coalition can be built with more than 70 MKs, meaning the Zionist Union joins, then all the portfolios would be reshuffled. And so he's making Bennett agree to that. That is not something so serious. I don't think that Herzog is about to join the government, but what that does is it deters the various coalition partners because there is a theoretical alternative out there. Another thing that deters them is that they're not as strong as they used to be. If Naftali Bennett thought he would be prime minister one day, well, now he just went down from 12 seats to 8. If Avigdor Lieberman thought he could be part of some strange conspiracy to unseat Netanyahu together with the left, well, that's not going to happen anymore. He got 40,000 votes from people who don't speak Russian. 40,000. That's all. He's basically politically dead outside of the Russian sector. And so not having an alternative candidate for prime minister from another party politically is very on great stability. The last thing that they've done that I think makes the government more stable is keep the press at bay. You know, included in this coalition agreement clause that says.
Gil, I don't know if you can hear me, Gil. You're cutting out a little bit. Can you move to a better?
I am.
I know you're on your. Yeah, a little bit, just right at the end there.
Okay, I purposely moved a spot that I thought would be best. I'll try to move to another place over here. Let me know if I'm getting better or worse, hot, cold.
You're good. You're good.
Lisa, I'm good. Keep going. Okay, so Netanyahu. He's included a clause that says that the communications minister, whatever he supports when it comes to reforms and when it comes to the media in Israel, the coalition partners have to agree. So that means that there's no more danger for Yisrael Hayom, the newspaper that's so pro-Netanyahu. That means that Netanyahu could at any point close Channel 10 and put pressure on his opponents in the press. Keep in mind how important that this is for Netanyahu, because who are his enemies right now? The opposition is weak. Herzog cannot present a formidable alternative. Yair Lapid was just weakened, going down from 19 seats to 11. Who is the real opposition leader? Well, there's the media in Israel. There's the media in America. Remember, Netanyahu at one point said to our editor, Steve Lindy, that his real enemies are Haaretz and the New York Times. He got in trouble for saying that. And, of course, Barack Obama. I mean, he didn't say that, but I'm saying that, that Barack Obama behaves as the main opposition leader to Netanyahu. That is his functioning in internal Israeli politics. He is the one who puts on the most pressure, who criticizes, who gives an impression that he would even abandon support for Israel in the United Nations. If there's going to be any real political pressure on Netanyahu in the next 20 months or so, then it would be from the White House. And then that leads to more anti-Netanyahu media in Israel and potential political problems in the future. And so how does he deal with that? Well, right now it's Avigdor Lieberman is going to be given the foreign affairs portfolio. When Avigdor Lieberman was supposed to work together with Hillary Clinton, she wouldn't even talk to him. Danny Ayalon had to do the work back then. And so there is serious talk about appointing Michael Oren as the deputy foreign minister, and he is someone who has wonderful ties with the Obama administration, with Hillary Clinton, as well as, of course, whatever Republican candidate for president there would be. And so we're waiting to see whether that appointment is going to happen. And so as soon as this government is formed, because of those 5-6 different reasons why there would be political stability, Netanyahu will be able to deal with what the people of Israel want him to be dealing with, bridging those gaps economically, and raising the standard of living and lowering the cost of living, and continuing his efforts to prevent the nuclearization of Iran, keep Israel safe from the threats coming from Syria and from Hezbollah, as well as from Gaza, and start with his electoral reforms that he wants to do. He wants to strengthen the largest parties in order to make the government more stable. He would love to pass something that would make automatically the leader of the largest party become the prime minister. Think about that if he did that. There are 3 party leaders among his coalition partners who used to be members of Likud and who would like to be prime minister someday, and Avigdor Lieberman, Moshe Kachlon, and Naftali Bennett. They would have to join together with Likud. They would have to form some larger party if the left would ever pose a serious threat, and if the law said that the largest leader of the largest party automatically would become prime minister. And because of that possibility that would pass, that is something that would also make them cause him less problems politically, make them have to come in line. And we'll see if these electoral reforms could pass that could make the government more stable for the future. Maybe we'll start having elections every 4 years and not every 2 years, which would make life better for political correspondents and their families. So that's what's going on politically right now. Feel free to ask me any question you want to know about what's going on behind the scenes in Israeli politics. And before I turn over the floor to questions, a couple different plugs. Besides the Jerusalem Post, I have a daily radio show on voiceofisrael.com. Please check out voiceofisrael.com. It's a wonderful 24-hour, 7 days a week English talk radio from Jerusalem. And my other plug is that I have a speaking tour coming up from May 29th until June 10th, 11th. I still have some time in New York during the day, for instance, to speak. And I'd be happy if anyone needs a speaker in their office to explain what's really going on behind the scenes in Israeli politics. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Gil. Before we get to questions, I want to take advantage of that, and you can be sure that in the beginning of June we're going to take advantage of the fact that you are going to be here in New York, and you can expect to see those of you who are on the call who are going to be on the East Coast where Gil is going to be. You can expect to see an event coming up for AFL. That's number one. Number two, I also want to do, in addition to your plug for Voice of Israel, I want to just add in that our leadership mission to Israel is going on May 31st to June 3rd. One of our stops along the way is going to be the studio of Voice of Israel radio, online radio, which is fascinating. Gil has a show on there, as do our friends Dan Diker, Yishai Fleischer, and quite a few others. So we're looking forward to seeing that as well. Anyone who wants more information can simply email me, adam@aflikud.org. And without taking any more time, I'm going to hand it over to Sarah, who is going to be moderating all of the questions. Sarah?
Gil, when you started talking about who's an opposition leader to Bibi, Adam's with me today in New York, and we looked at each other and we both whispered so no one would hear Obama. And
yep.
You suggested that several minutes later. My first question is not something that you touched on, but I've been reading a lot recently about absentee balloting for Israelis. What are your thoughts about that? And Adam,
thank you so much. Thank you so much for asking. I mean, I wrote an article in today's Jerusalem Post about the clause in the coalition agreement that supports initiating absentee balloting for Israel. We've never had absentee balloting before, except for people who work for the Israeli government, diplomats and the Jewish agency and other emissaries. When there are so many Israelis abroad, there's a need for it when you have elections get called 3 months in advance, and we never know when it's going to happen. I have friends who were happened to have trips planned to go to the United States on March 17th. They didn't get to vote. I think they should get the right to vote. I'm the child of Israeli parents, raised in Chicago by them, and they were so much more Israeli than me culturally, and they would have loved to be voting while they're there. But there's a lot of optics to it, because in Israel there's a stigma to people who made yerida, they call it, going down as opposed to making aliyah, who aren't paying taxes, who aren't serving in the army, and who aren't under the constant threat of missile attacks from Iran, Syria, Lebanon, and Gaza. And so they're talking about which criteria there would be. In the past, the Likud has said if you're abroad for only 5 years, it's okay, but not more than that. Shas has said only if you're abroad for 2 months. Then again, they have a different leader now than in the past. So it's very controversial. I don't see it ever really passing.
Yeah, it's one thing in America where you've
Uh-oh.
It's different in America where you have 330 million people and a small percentage live out of the country. But it seems to me in the Israeli situation, the Israeli model, the absentee ballots could perhaps skew an election, perhaps. Okay, my second question is, tell me about Ron Dermer's spot. What do you think will be replaced? Who do you think will be replaced with?
So just one more thing on the absentee balloting. The reason why the left is so opposed to it is they have this assumption that Israelis abroad are right-wing. Now, having met a lot of Israelis abroad, one could say maybe that if you count all of them, including those who have been abroad for 30 years, then maybe. But if you're talking about limiting it to people abroad for 5 years, then you've gotten, college students and high-tech people who are not so right-wing. So that assumption I don't really understand, that it would help the Likud and the right so much, but it tends to be brought up by the Likud, though Nachman Shai from Labor brought it up last time. Look, I think Ron's job is safe. I think that Netanyahu trusts Ron and he wants to have Ron there. I know that Haaretz, especially their diplomatic correspondent Barak Ravid, they've been on an ugly, angry campaign to try to unseat him, and I don't think it's going to work. I think that Ron will still be there for however long his term is. There has been talk, though, that Ron Persor in the UN, his term ends in January. Maybe they could switch, and Ron would be an excellent UN ambassador, and Persor would certainly be more statesmanlike and get along with the Democrats better in Washington. We'll see.
Well, interesting. I hadn't thought about that kind of possibility. What about money going to defense, given that the defense budget has been continually reduced recently? Do you think with the new finance minister and with a slightly different focus, or a finance minister whom you described as being happy, do you think some of the defense budget will be restored, particularly also in light of Iran?
I don't know. The coalition agreement is extremely long, and we've not been given it. which is very controversial. Normally when they sign an agreement, they give it to the press. They haven't. And so I don't know what it says about the defense budget. The budget is far from decided. By law, it has to be passed by March, but because there's no government, there's no way to make them. So it's only going to be passed by October. That's 6 months away. Anything can happen.
I see. Okay. Another question relates to expanding the number of ministers. That's certainly been discussed and in a way to address more people's concerns and to make sure that Bibi gives out spots to everybody in Likud that he needs to. Has that discussion had any serious traction?
Yes, they will be expanding the government. They're in the outgoing government where we're 22 ministers. There will again be 22 ministers. They had passed a bill that said that the next government would have 18 ministers. That bill will not be implemented yet. They're going to pass something that says that it will have to be implemented next time, which they, of course, can then do again next time. Look, we were far away from where we were a few years ago when between the ministers and deputies there were 40. The government is a lot more cost effective and a lot more careful about such things now. And so if Yair Lapid was willing to sit in the government with 22 ministers, he can't really whine about the next government having 22 ministers as well. The number of deputy ministers is going to rise by a lot too, because it's just the way it works with the ultra-Orthodox. They like to have deputy ministers. It makes the government function better when everyone is kept happy. When Netanyahu was prime minister the first time, he really tried to limit the number of ministers, and because of that, he made a lot of enemies. He didn't appoint Silvan Shalom a minister from the get-go. He made him do some rotation in the Ministry of Science, and that didn't help the two of them get along, now did it? And so in the end, governments are more stable when all the partners are satisfied.
Gil, I'm not sure if you mentioned Yuval and where he'll be and if he'll stay in his current position. I know there's been discussion about Bennett taking that, but I guess that didn't come to pass. And how did actually Yuval, if you know, how did he feel about even that discussion at all about someone taking his position?
Okay, so let me answer. You're basically asking two different questions there, Sarah. One is about the position that Yuval will have, and one is about his particular portfolio that he has now of strategic affairs. So first about Yuval. Yuval is being discussed seriously as a candidate for justice minister. The reason why is that Netanyahu needs to have somebody trusted, that he can trust in such a position, and there's nobody he trusts more than Yuval.
Actually, Gil, I think probably that we should identify exactly who Yuval is by his last name so that everybody on the phone call knows.
Sure. Yuval Stein is Netanyahu's right-hand man, was Minister of Strategic Affairs in the outgoing government. And the Justice Minister is a very powerful job because they run the Ministerial Committee on Legislation, which is a very important step in the legislating process. It basically decides what bills the government supports. In fact, that's actually where most of the decisions ultimately are made in this country. And it's just the Justice Minister and representatives of other parties who don't do all that much. Really, the Justice Minister decides legislation by himself, can delay any kind of bill that the Prime Minister doesn't like. And so that's why Yuval is being talked about for that. It happens to be that his wife is a judge, which could cause some problems, but I think that they'd work out a solution about that. So I see Yuval Stein as becoming the Justice Minister, which also allows him to be part of the Security Cabinet.
And if that happened, would he continue his prominence in the entire Iranian negotiation?
Going back to the job which he had before is probably more likely.
I see. And has Yuval himself indicated where he prefers to be?
Yuval is smart enough not to talk to the press 5 days before Netanyahu decides his job.
Yeah, which is why in part that he gets very good jobs. I think that we're about to turn it over to Adam.
No, just a quick question here with respect to, if you could give us the rundown, so to speak. Actually, tonight in Chicago is the NFL draft, and everyone wants to know how everyone thinks they're going to predict the picks as they come in, who's going first, second, third. If you could just give us a rundown. I know you mentioned a couple of people, specifically you mentioned Bennett taking education, as well as taking the, I think you said diaspora affairs, maybe it was Sarah. If you could give us a rundown of the top names and positions as far as you can tell right now where they're going to be. People like Bogi Ya'alon, he's staying in defense, yes or no. Gilad Erdan, number 2 on the Likud list, so on and so forth. If you can give us a general idea.
Okay, so I'm going to be going through the cabinet. I'm going to do Likud last because it's what we know the least. So Moshe Kachlin's our finance minister. Our Minister of Housing is his number 2, Yoav Gallant, the former Deputy Chief of Staff of the IDF. The Environment Minister is apparently going to be a friend of Kachlon who is not in the Knesset, named Avi Gabai. Who their Deputy Minister is, we don't know. They received the Deputy Ministry without being told in which ministry it's going to be, and it could be Michael Oren in the Foreign Ministry, could be somebody else. In United Torah Judaism, the health portfolio will be controlled by Yaakov Litzman, and they're controlling the Knesset Finance Committee. In Shas, apparently Aryeh Deri is going to be the Minister of Religious Affairs and the Economy. How those things go together, I don't really get, but fine. And then his number actually, 2...
Yeah, Gil, he probably thinks they go together very, very well.
It could be. And his number 2, Yitzhak Cohen, is going to be, they want him to be a minister without portfolio inside the finance ministry. And the Attorney General is causing problems with that appointment. Even though Netanyahu, when he was finance minister, had Meir Shitrit as another minister inside the ministry. But so that would be Shas, but he's still trying to get the welfare portfolio too. By Yudi, the education ministry will go to Naftali Bennett. Also, the diaspora affairs. There was a report on TV tonight that Natan Sharansky had a problem with Bennett remaining Minister of Diaspora Affairs. Sharansky's spokesman denied it, so I didn't write it, but it's interesting. I don't know. Then they're also getting the culture portfolio for Ayelet Shaked and the agriculture portfolio, which involves building in Judea and Samaria, for Uri Ariel. And Victor Lieberman is apparently going to be our foreign minister, and the absorption minister will continue to be Sofa Landver from his party. That leaves us with Likud, right?
Yes, so, and when it comes to the Likud, you said that everyone is going to be happy in this government. When I start looking at the list of the Likud ministers, 30 MKs in all, and probably, like you said, a dozen who are going to get, or at least certainly it can be said they deserve ministries. There are going to be quite a few disappointed people in this party, no?
Absolutely. I did say that the Likud people are very worried, and a lot of people will end up not getting what they want. I hope that wasn't during the part when people couldn't hear me. But it's going to be a very serious problem. There are not enough portfolios to go around. There are already 5 ministers who need to stay ministers, and so Yisrael Katz will keep his transportation ministry. Yuval Steinitz will be promoted to justice minister. And Gilad Erdan is the number 2. He has to be given a top portfolio. They talk about giving him his current interior portfolio in addition to the internal security portfolio, to be in charge of the police, where there are a lot of problems. And that enables him to be a part of the security cabinet and have an impact on the big security decisions. Well, Silvan Shalom also has to be given a portfolio. And if his Negev and Galilee development will be taken away, I don't know. He obviously would like to be promoted, but the bad blood between him and Netanyahu, I don't know if that can happen. And then we know that both Elkin and Yariv Levin have to be given ministries. They have worked so hard for Netanyahu, and they obviously deserve it after what they've done. Here they are slaving away to build this government. It would be so sad if they don't get both of them portfolios.
What about the top women in the Likud as well? With
that's exactly what I was going to go to next.
Yeah.
So you've got 3 women. Chances are 2 of them will receive portfolios among Gila Gamliel, Tzipi Chotovely, and Miri Regev. I've been hearing for so long that Gila's about to be a minister. One would think that would happen. Tzipi Chotovely claims that she brought thousands of right-wing voters from the Judea and Samaria because she headed the campaign there. But then again, she was 20th on the list. That doesn't make you be a minister. So, it's probably more likely to see Gila and Miri Regev. But then again, Bibi has been embarrassed by Miri Regev's behavior, so maybe he could just make her deputy defense minister like he did with Danon last time and take Tzipi instead. I don't know. It would be pretty hard to justify that. Miri Regev is the highest-ranking woman on the Likud list ever. She won the 5th seat, fair and square. That makes her a minister.
Yeah,
so one would think that she would be a minister. As a person, she's not impressive at all. But as a commander my commander in the IDF, no one really looked up to her. But still, in the Likud, she's very popular.
Gil, I'd like to ask you or discuss one last thought. We talked on the conversation, you mentioned I think several times that the opposition is really sort of out there in left field and they're sufficiently weakened. But if we roll back the clock till even noon or 3 p.m. of March 17th Israeli time, we didn't know that. And so we stand here knowing that Likud got many, many more votes than we expected. But it wasn't like that the day before, and it wasn't like that up till noon or 3 o'clock or even 6 o'clock Israeli time. So if you're sitting in Herzog's seat right now, what's your assessment of the world and your assessment of the strength of Avodah, or whatever you want to call their group?
Look, Herzog should be very happy. The fact that he brought them the 24 seats that he did is very impressive when Israelis have moved so far to the right, when the thought of missiles landing in Tel Aviv is just so recent for Israelis who were so scared by that war. And so he should pat himself on the back. He did a good job. It'll be harder to unseat him than it's been other labor leaders. So he'll be all right. But look, a deal was signed with 2 coalition partners yesterday. They didn't say anything in the Zionist Union. They've been relatively quiet. And what are they going to say? What are they going to do? What are they going to say? The peace process can be moved forward. They know it can. So there's very little that they can do in being a serious opposition as long as the proper socioeconomic reforms are happening, which is what the people want. Just to add briefly to the answer to the previous question, I don't want to get in trouble with anyone, so I'm going to throw out a few more names, so you'll know that I said them. Obviously, Moshe Yaalon will continue to be Minister of Defense, but Begin will receive a portfolio. Danny Danon could receive a portfolio. Tzachir Negvi, Ophir Kunis. Ayub Kara is begging, says there has to be a non-Jew who receives a portfolio, especially if it's him. So there are a lot of people expecting to be ministers.
Okay, Gil, I want to thank you very much. And, of course, like I said, we're going to do our best to arrange to speak with you when you are here on the East Coast, when you're back in the U.S. at the beginning of June. I once again want to tell everyone about the upcoming leadership mission to Israel. Please email me for more information, adam@aflikud.org. And finally, I want to thank everyone for joining us today, and I look forward to seeing you all again on our conference call Insider Briefings, and we look forward to quieter and more stable times once the government is formed soon. Thank you again, everyone, and have a good day.